Thank you very much. This much I know, that if somebody emails you and says, what is the title of your talk? I really need to know urgently, and you haven't a clue, and yet on the screen in front of you, you've got 3 pictures floating around, one of which is a bus, one of which is a bottle, and one of which is a penguin, then that becomes the title of the talk. More seriously, Richard, in the talk in the first session, said this evening is about young people, and I was very aware that there's no point saying lots of things I might know about that are absolutely irrelevant to young people today. So I tried to think, what was important to me? What have I learned that I found out about my school days that I didn't know when I was at school that might be of interest? So this much I know, is that you should never underestimate the inspiration and the effect on your life of the teaching of a really good teacher, and that it might take you many years to appreciate that teaching, that inspiration. So, to wind back to me being at school where you are now, 1966, a long time ago, it's the first year, I think in new money that's now called year 7. This is my class, my form teacher. But the teacher I want to talk about is this man, who was my biology teacher. His name was Kenneth Murch. His picture was taken a little bit before I was at school. And he was an extraordinary teacher, not because of the teaching that he did in the classroom, but because he was one of these teachers that took education out of the classroom. And every Saturday, he would take those that wanted to go on field trips out into the countryside in West Sussex and teach us how to look at nature, how to actually understand nature by looking at it. I haven't got any pictures from those days, but I did actually, funnily enough, find a picture of the bus, so there's the bus. You just have to imagine a lot of young school children, keen with notebooks, with specimen jars, piling out of that bus, looking under logs for creepy crawlies, looking in rock pools for starfish. And we learnt an awful lot from Kenneth Murch. And it wasn't just out in the field. Back in the lab too, he told us and showed us new ways of understanding the natural world by new ways of looking at it. And he was a pioneer in various forms of filming, and filming through the microscope and time-lapse filming. So it wasn't just that he knew the names of all of the things that we found, the butterflies, the birds, whatever. He basically showed us ways to understand them more, and I think also to give us a sense of wonder, because it's all very well knowing the details of the natural world and the science and the terminology, but you should never lose track of the wonder that it should inspire in you when you look around. And the way he did this was, during the war he'd been a technician in the RAF, and his job had been to fit the cameras that were installed next to the machine guns in planes like the Spitfire. These cameras took pictures like this, and they were simply there so that when the planes landed after a dogfight, they could decide actually whether the German plane had been shot down or not. And the cameras, they were called G45s. This is a G45 camera. They were made in their thousands during the Second World War, and after the war, when all the planes were being scrapped, they could be picked up for a song, basically. Kenneth Murch saw the potential in these. He got a whole load of them really cheaply. He knew how they worked, and he set about in the field club after school, building systems so that we could film through the microscope with them and time-lapse things. And it was fascinating to see Arthur's time-lapse film in the first session talk this morning, this evening, because I remember very clearly doing time-lapse films, and it's great to see that that's still being done in schools. Anyway, these systems weren't the high-tech, expensive systems that we use in natural history filming today. Kenneth Murch made them out of scrap metal. I remember there's an awful lot of Meccano involved, but he in doing so, he basically inspired us to find new perspectives, new ways of looking at things. And the things that you see in the natural world, if you look through the microscope, that you just can't see with a naked eye. And if you can film through the microscope, then you can actually see that movement. And I remember very clearly one of the first films I made when I was about 12 or 13 was of Daphne at water police through the microscope. Also, and it was uncanny hearing Arthur's earlier on, I remember doing a time-lapse film of a sticky bud, horse chestnut bud opening. Unlike Arthur, I was lucky enough I started my time lapse at the beginning of the term, so I managed to actually open before half term and nine. So at school, this extraordinary teacher, Kenneth Murch, he gave us the experience of using film to understand and appreciate the natural world. But it didn't really sink in then how important that was. So I'm basically now going to, fortunately for you, fast forward 35 years through my life. Lots of different other jobs, nothing to do with filming, nothing to do with creepy crawlies. One particular job I did actually involved was teaching, but I don't think I was a very good teacher. But anyway, 35 years after leaving school, I found myself working as an aerial cameraman using one of these cameras on the front of a helicopter here. They're stabilised cameras, and they enable film to be taken from something that's moving and vibrating and wobbling, but the film will remain absolutely steady. So it offered up a completely new way of looking down at the Earth from the air. At the time that I was doing this work, I was aware that the BBC were beginning to film Planet Earth. And in a way, like Kenneth Murch, they were trying to find new ways of using film to help us understand and appreciate the natural world and wildlife and the environment. And they had, unfortunately for me, contracted an American, a Hollywood aerial filming team to do all of the aerial filming for Planet Earth. So I kind of felt left out because I really would have liked to have been involved in it. But I found out there was one place that the Hollywood camera team working on Planet Earth aerial team couldn't go, and that was Antarctica. And the reason being for that is that the only helicopters that you can find down on the Antarctic Peninsula, which is where most of the wildlife is in Antarctica, are the helicopters on this ship, which is the Royal Navy's ice patrol ship HMS Endurance. And you can just see on the stern flight deck one of the Lynx helicopters. And the BBC and the Hollywood crew had been working for months with the Royal Navy trying to fit their camera onto the Lynx helicopter. And for reasons which I've never really understood, but for which I'm eternally grateful, they couldn't do it. It was a kind of a cultural clash of bureaucratic problems, whatever. So I stuck my hand up and said, use my system, I'll get this to work. So I worked for a few months with the Royal Navy to fit my camera to the side of a Lynx helicopter. And eventually got it working, got the system working. And it meant that for the next 4 years, we did 5 trips to Antarctica, filming first of all for Planet Earth, then for Life, and most recently for Frozen Planet, which is transmitting at the moment. And we were filming all sorts of things: whales, penguins, wildlife and scenery. And although the films were technically incredibly different to what I had been doing when I was at school in Kenneth Murch's Field Club film unit, I was always aware, I became more and more aware, how important all the skills that he taught me were. And it wasn't just sort of in terms of optics and lenses and things like that, but also that technical confidence of dealing with machinery and mending things and repairing things. So that came back to me 35 years later, how important that was. Now, the crew of Endurance were absolutely fantastic, especially the pilots and the flight crew. And so at the end of each trip, I'd put together a clip reel of some of the shots for them to take home. I have to say the crew were kind of quite into the helicopters and naval hardware as much as they were wildlife, so I tended to put in a few pictures of helicopters and ships. So for the first clip I'm showing this evening, it's one of these souvenir clips I did for the crew of Endurance. It's got rather a lot of helicopters in, but it'll give you an idea of the environment that we were filming in for those various series over the last few years. There was actually one place that even HMS Endurance couldn't get us to, and that was the emperor penguin colonies at Snow Hill Island. And the reason being that it's surrounded by thick pack ice earlier in the year when we wanted to film. So we hitched a ride on this, which is the most powerful icebreaker in the Southern Hemisphere, a Russian icebreaker, and it has two Mi-2, very old Russian helicopters on board. And we had the same problem with the Russians as with the Navy, that we had to arrange to make a bracket so that we could join the camera to the helicopter. And what I thought would be interesting here is just to compare very briefly the two differences between the British bracket, which took 3 months to do. I remember one meeting was a team of 26 people in one room planning it. We did 2 days of ground tests, we did 2 hours of flight testing, and it cost thousands of pounds. On the Captain Kalemnikov, we had to make a Russian bracket. It took 3 hours to make. It took 2 Russian engineers who didn't speak any English. They did a ground test for 2 minutes. I insisted on a flight test because they wouldn't do it, which they did for 50 seconds. And the cost, well, the last picture, it was a bottle of vodka. Quite interesting country. But having said that, the Navy has been wonderful. The idea of the filming at Snow Hill was to film the mothers coming back across the ice to feed their chicks. I haven't got any clips of it, so you'll have to watch Frozen Planet either next week or the week after to see it. But hopefully I've given you, once the bus, the bottle and some penguins, but also just maybe the students amongst you now from the school, maybe you should just be thinking, I wonder which teacher it is that's teaching me now that I'll be thinking back about in 35 years and saying, I really learned a lot from that person, and probably I didn't know it at the time, but I'm really grateful, because I'm sure you've all got teachers like that now. Now I've gone slightly over my time, but I've got one final clip. Another clip reel I did for the crew of Endurance. This time I managed to persuade them not to have any pictures of helicopters in, so it's just the environment.
much, and I apologise if I've eaten into the next break.